The string bean incident. I noticed that you grow vegetables in the front yard. You may not be aware that our neighborhood is more formal than that. The note was anonymous, but we knew the author. The language was delicate, but we knew the meaning. In another time and place, a missive of this nature would have sown the seeds of a decade of animosity. But in a town built on diplomacy, a different outcome awaited us. This was early in the 1980s. My family and I lived in Northwest Washington, D.C., in a neighborhood that had rapidly evolved from a comfortable middle-class community to a destination for the prosperous. Our neighbors were lawyers, diplomats, and government officials. Our house was modest but comfortable. Our 1972 Dodge Dart was an outlier on streets lined with late-model Volvos and BMWs. If our rusting two-door sedan stood out, then our garden was even more of an aberration. This was no orderly flower garden, but 1,000 square feet of productive jungle. Raspberry and gooseberry bushes, Hungarian peppers, strawberries, tomatoes, spring onions, chives, Jerusalem artichokes, and salad greens of all kinds. The garden was more than a hobby. My father was a Washington Post staff writer and garden columnist who was an early advocate of organic methods. He spent every free moment of daylight weeding, planting, mulching, composting, and harvesting. Growing up in the 1980s, I was keenly aware that my family's front yard wasn't the only thing that marked me as different from my peers. When I was invited to sleepovers at my friends' homes, I feasted on steak dinners and sugary breakfast cereals. At home, our meals were mostly made with fresh ingredients from our garden or from the vegetable mixes my mother had made and canned. Her packed mason jars lined the back of every cupboard in the kitchen. My parents' habits were not a political statement. They were European immigrants who grew up with gardens and home-cooked meals. Continuing to eat this way, and rarely dining at restaurants, had another practical consequence for the family. The substantial savings on food costs meant that they could assist all three of their children in paying for college. This was in the days before gardening, organics, or even vegetables became at all hip. What was fashionable to our well-heeled neighbors had nothing to do with health. They drank copious cocktails, smoked cigarettes, and ate rich food. The culinary temple of the elite was only a few blocks away, an upscale grocery store called Southern Place Gourmet. Its broad, immaculate aisles resembled those of a fine furniture store more than a grocery. There was no mention of organic, and there were certainly no bulk bins. Gourmet, at that time, was all about food that was highly flavored, preferably imported, and perfectly packaged. Vermont maple syrup candies, Alaskan smoked salmon in a shabby chic wooden box, ornate tins of Russian caviar, Italian pasta, Spanish olives, Argentine beef, dozens of varieties of French cheese, and a famously large collection of exotically flavored jelly beans, the favorite treat of then-President Reagan. The health food stores of that era were far from fashionable. Their narrow aisles, haphazard shelves, and uneven fluorescent lighting evoked a thrift store aesthetic, and it was common to find moldy bread and off-tasting yogurt. Expired products weren't surprising. Employees were often more interested in reading activist newsletters or planning their next road trip than taking inventory or stocking shelves. In the 90s, the gourmet movement, which had once mocked the brown rice crowd, drank the Kool-Aid, the organic smoothie, just in time to capitalize on the growing interest in health food. Chains like Whole Foods and Wild Oats replaced the funky local places, and the corporate mindset turned health food stores into hygienic, efficient, and orderly places. This turn of events gave us a gentrified model of health that is just as exclusive as the old Southern Place gourmet. Health is now perceived as part of the good life that goes with a big salary, big enough at least to buy $90 Lululemon yoga pants and $6 loaves of gluten-free bread. Health has been packaged and sold to us, and it's mostly a ripoff. Overpriced posh grocery stores, organic versions of highly processed junk food, dietary supplements of dubious value, and high-fashion workout clothes. But let's get back to that note. It was written by our next-door neighbor, an elderly, wealthy patrician woman. Her intent was to notify my parents that in America, the land you own and the way you use it is an expression of social class, and that we were sending the wrong message. Growing food was something that lower-class people did because they had to scrape together a living. In a wealthy neighborhood, gardens did not include edible plants. The aesthetic ideal was closer to a golf course, meticulously landscaped with close-shorn grass, borders of flowers, and orderly hedges. Rather than confront our neighbor, or even discuss the matter, my father presented her with bowls of just-picked raspberries and gooseberries. Later, she discovered the superiority of our ripe tomatoes to the ones Southern Place Gourmet offered. Even though this happened many years ago, my family still remembers that, of all our diplomatic offerings, she reserved her highest praise for our string beans. This made us all laugh as they were easy to grow and not particularly unique. This book is my basket of string beans. It's my invitation to my neighbors to discover a path to health that is inexpensive and simple. Health is a blessing available to all of us.